Hey guys, Katie here, and
Hello.
that's Ryan, our preferred lender with Waterstone Mortgage. Can we see him okay?
Here, I'll get in a little bit.
Okay,
All right.
we just need to get close, Ryan. All right.
Good afternoon.
Hello all. I hope that you're having an awesome day. It is absolutely beautiful out there. Lovely weather. Let's enjoy it until, a week from now when it gets too hot. So, we are here to talk about a very interesting topic, and I get a lot of questions about this topic. Actually, I don't know, you probably do too.
I do, yes.
Just going through our daily, day-to-day business. Hi, Katie Hack. And I get a lot of clients that come to me and say, well, is it better to sell my house as is and go out and buy something new or buy something remodeled, buy something pretty? Or should I consider refinancing my home and putting money into it and remodeling it? So that's what we're going to talk about today. I have 14 questions. I don't know if you guys can see this here. I have 14 questions that came off of the group. I did a little teeny tiny little poll yesterday to get some questions out of you. So we're going to be answering those. But first, we're going to discuss refinancing. What are the costs? What does that look like? What's the big picture of this? And that I am going to give to my sidekick over here.
Thank you.
The genius Ryan that knows about all of this stuff. So.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. As Katie was mentioning, refinancing, that's one of the things that we wanted to discuss. So there's 3 different types of refinancing that you could do that's going to take some equity out of your home and allow you to do some of the upgrades or even, pay off credit cards, car loans, student loans. And I wanted to go through each of those so you kind of know the difference, the benefits, and the disadvantages of each of those. So the first one, which we could help you out with, is just a full refinance. And what that is you pay off your current mortgage completely. So when you're doing a full refinance, you have a completely new loan, new term, new interest rate. And one of the things with that is you have to get an appraisal on your home. So that's another thing that we were kind of discussing a little bit is before, if you're either going to sell or refinance, it's always a good idea to kind of get a good idea of what your home is worth. Mm-hmm. And, Katie would be great at pulling comparables and determining how much you could either sell your home for or how much it's going to appraise for if you want to refinance.
Right. It's not a Zestimate, guys, okay? We all know about the Zestimates. Not a Zestimate. Anyway, go ahead.
So getting an appraisal and determining how much equity you have in the house. And with a refinance, a full one, when you pay everything off, the cost is usually about $2,000, and that includes title fees, underwriting fees, processing, and the appraisal. And that could be wrapped up into the mortgage, so nothing comes out of your pocket, and you could just get cash out. So a common misconception with refinancing and getting cash out, though, is that if there's equity in the home, you could take that out, any of that out automatically. So for instance, I had a client whose home, he looked at his Zestimate, which isn't always accurate, but he thought the home was worth about $100,000, and he bought the home for $90,000. So he thought he could take that $10,000 out, but that's a misconception. That's not what you could do. The loan to value that you're allowed to take cash out is actually 80% maximum in most cases. I'll talk about some of the differences. So you're going to want to make sure that your home is worth enough that 80% of that you could pay off your current mortgage, and the difference between the two will be cash in hand to use to remodel, pay off credit cards, things like that. So the disadvantage, of course, is the cost of a full refinance. It's a little bit more expensive than the other options. But one of the benefits is if your rate is a little high right now, if your mortgage insurance is high, it's a good idea to try the refinance because rates are low right now. So maybe you could get in a better term. Maybe you could lower your term, pay off some items, and get some cash out, but at the same time, keep your mortgage payment low. So that's the benefit of that program.
Or get a fixed rate from an ARM.
Get a fixed rate from an ARM, that's correct.
An ARM is an adjustable rate mortgage. So sometimes, you hear somebody say a 3-1 ARM or a 5-1 ARM. That means it's fixed for an amount of 3 years or 5 years or whatever the first number is. And then the 5-1 or the 3-1, that means it adjusts annually after. So that can get a little bit scary.
Yes, that's when that refinance would really make sense because you want to lock in when rates are low. Because this year and a few years after, they do expect rates to actually go up. When the economy is doing well, jobs are being created, rates typically kind of go up with the stock market. So that's why we're going to see a little bit of an increase in rate, and that's what's predicted right now. So that's when a full refinance is a good idea. Another option actually would be a home equity line of credit, also called a HELOC. So if you like your current mortgage, if it's a great rate, it's a low term, and you're comfortable with the payment, and you don't want to touch that and pay the full thing off, a home equity line of credit might be a good idea. And it's very similar to a refinance where your max loan to value is 80%. So if you have equity in your home, you can't take the full thing out. But depending on what the home is worth and what it appraises for, if you take 80% of that, the difference between that and what you owe is a line of credit you could take out. Actually, though, True West Credit Union, they're allowing 90% right now.
Oh,
so
wow.
It's a great program. That's the highest that I've seen available. So if you have that much equity in your home, you could take 90% out. So what the line of credit allows you to do is it kind of works as a check card or a debit card, where you don't have to take that money out, but it's available. So if you want to do renovations on your home, but you're not really sure how much it's going to cost or when you want to take it out, it could be a good option, because you could take maybe $2,000 out there, $5,000 out here, and work on projects, during the withdrawal period.
Because you're only making payments on what you have drawn from.
What you've drawn from it. Yeah, that's a great.
Does that make sense,
great
guys?
point. So you're only making payments. So you don't make it on the full amount that they're giving you a line of credit for, only with what you withdraw. So one of the benefits of that is, like I said, the flexibility. You can take out as much as you want, and there's a withdrawal period. So they usually give you 5 to 10 years that you could take money out, and during that period, you're only paying on the interest actually for what you take out. After the 5 or 10 years, depending on which option you go with, you do have to pay principal and interest. So, and that's usually on a 15 or a 30-year term. So that's the benefit, though, is the flexibility and only paying interest on what you withdraw for a little while. So that's a great program as a home equity line of credit. One of the drawbacks of it is it's usually a variable interest rate. And as I mentioned, rates are increasing. So a lot of people, it makes them a little nervous getting into a variable interest rate. So that's one of the drawbacks, but one of the advantages that the cost is less than a full refinance. Like I said, $2,000 or so for a full refinance, but for a line of credit, usually there's only just a few fees like underwriting and processing, and it maybe costs $500 to $800 to do that, and that could all be wrapped up into the mortgage as well.
Perfect. What's the rate difference? Is there a rate difference?
Yes, that was. I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, so the rates are usually higher with the line of credit as well. It's variable, but they usually start with a little bit of a teaser rate. So right now a typical conventional rate is about 4.125, and you'll see some lines of credit are quoted at about 3.5. But then they get into an adjustment period, and it's usually going to be 4.5 to 5.5 in the next 2 or 3 years. So that's the drawback, is a lack of certainty on those. Mm-hmm. But there is a lot of flexibility. It doesn't cost much to take it out, and you could usually pay it off at any time. So those are two options: a full refinance, home equity line of credit, and the other one is just a regular home equity loan, a second mortgage, really. So
it doesn't act like that drawing.
It's not the drawing. No, what you do is you take out a lump sum. So it's a great option when you know exactly how much you want to take out, and you have kind of a big renovation, and it's all budgeted, and you want the money right away, and it's not going to be like a withdrawal period for a long extended amount of time. So it's very similar to a line of credit, but you take one full lump sum out. So the benefit of it is it's not a variable interest rate. It's locked in. It's a 30-year fixed. So it's a great option if you're kind of nervous about where rates are going. But one of the drawbacks is the rates are higher because second mortgages, banks consider a little bit more risky. If anything happens with the home, if it's not being paid on time, the second mortgages are the first ones to default. So that's why they get a little nervous about those and have higher interest rates on them. But it's still a good option if you don't want to touch your first mortgage, and if there's just a little bit of a chunk you want to take out for renovations. So those are the three options that are available, and kind of the advantages and disadvantages of all of them.
Awesome. So when we're looking in terms of cost, when we're trying, just sitting down, doing your pros and cons and saying, well, do we stay in this house and remodel it, or do we go out and buy something? Looking at just the cost of the money itself and the loan itself, how does that compare the refinance cost to a new purchase?
So that's a great question. So refinance cost, like I mentioned, it's usually between $2,000 for a full refinance, or maybe $500 to $1,000 for a home equity line of credit, or just a second mortgage. So when you're buying a house, there are closing costs associated with buying a home. There's lender fees, title fees. You have to pay for a full year of homeowners insurance. You have to pay for a little bit of taxes. So typically it's maybe about $4,500 to about $6,000 for closing costs on a new purchase. But a lot of the times, especially when you have a great agent like Katie, they can negotiate to have the seller cover the closing costs. And even now, there are down payment assistance programs. I know I mentioned that during our last Facebook Live feed that we did with Jennifer. And you could really get into a house with no money down if the seller pays for all the closing costs. So there are fees available, but not necessarily having to be paid out of your own pocket.
Right. So again, what Ryan brings up is very, very important. Discuss it with your representation. Hey, what are the chances that I can get my closing costs paid for on a purchase and perhaps even down payment covered on a purchase, and then essentially be buying for free? That it makes a real difference when you're doing your pros and cons and when you're looking at staying and refinancing versus purchasing. Yeah. All good with that? Cool. Couple of things that I would like for you all to keep in mind when your family's faced with this question. Hey, do we stay in our current house, make it pretty, or do we sell it and go ahead and find another pretty house or another brand new house or something? The thing that you'll hear me say, and those of you that know me very well are going to laugh your butts off, because it's location, 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 and again, location is so very important. And what I mean by that is when you're considering a move, think about the home that you're already in. If you do have that ability to extract some equity and remodel it, fix it up, do that kind of stuff, think about that location. Now, it's a different story if your home can no longer accommodate your family, meaning the space is just much too small. This backyard doesn't work anymore. This, 3-bedroom doesn't work anymore. We need a 5, something like that. Those are things that a remodel's not going to be able to change. But if the size of your home is great, you like where you live, and the location is killer, then that is something that you really need to consider, wouldn't you say?
Yes, absolutely.
Consider location.
Yes.
Another thing to consider when you're wondering whether or not to stay and remodel or buy is the age of the systems, the major systems in your home. So think about it. If the roof is shot, the AC is shot, the pool is shot, then that's something that you really need to consider in the cost of your remodel, because there is nothing worse than a pretty kitchen that's just been redone and destroyed by a leaky roof. Absolutely nothing worse than that. So when you're considering a purchase, obviously, there's different types of properties out there that you can purchase. But if you're considering like a new build property, for instance, all of those systems are going to be completely brand new. They're going to have manufacturer's warranties. If you turn around and buy something that's been completely remodeled or flipped or whatever you want to call it, chances are a lot of those systems have been touched as well. The roof is new. Even, the home could have been built in 1960, whatever, but the roof is brand new. Therefore, it has a manufacturer's warranty. The AC could be brand new. All of those major systems can really add up and can get to the top of your budget pretty quick.
Yes, absolutely.
Wouldn't you say? So those are things that you definitely need to consider and write down and put on that pros and cons list. Yes. All right. So anything else that you'd like to add before we get into questions?
Sure. Yeah. I know we were talking about, of course, refinancing or purchasing. There's cases where you find a home that you want to buy that doesn't necessarily have the upgrades that you're looking for, or it's perfect except for a few things like location. It's exactly where you want it to be, but it hasn't been remodeled in a while. The flooring is outdated, the roof needs to be redone. Maybe even you want to add an extra bedroom to the home. There is a loan option out there. Me and Katie have discussed it here. It's called a 203K loan. We don't know why it's called that, but really it's a home renovation loan on purchases. So it's not just for refinancing. You could actually do it on a purchase. So what it allows you to do is financing repairs into your loan. So let's say you're buying a home for $200,000, and what you would do is you actually have a contractor go out and give you a quote for everything that you want done to the property: new countertops, new appliances, flooring, anything that you want. And what we do is we add that to the loan. So what would be required is an appraiser would have to go out to the home and determine how much it would be worth after all those repairs. And if they feel like it will appraise for enough to cover everything you're wanting to do, you could finance the full thing. So if you do want to sell your home and buy another property and do some repairs, on top of that, that's going to be a great loan program, which we do offer in-house at Waterstone Mortgage.
Awesome. What's your phone number, Ryan?
My direct line is 480-635-3035.
Is that a texting line? Because we're texters.
Yes, that's a texting line as well.
And
yes.
Ryan's a ninja. That's why he gets to be on our team. If you text him at like 10 o'clock at night, poor thing, don't do it to him. But if you do, just to test him, he responds. It's awesome. Awesome. So text Ryan. All right, Ryan, we're going to put you on the spot here, and we have some questions from the group.
Great.
Most of them are for you, not for me.
Okay.
So a couple of the questions that came up, a few people were interested in what, if any, are the tax implications for refinancing?
Great question. Okay, so the tax implications, really, there really isn't. The one thing that you could possibly do is when you refinance, you could write off some of the fees with it. A tax preparer is a great person to ask about that, but if there are any origination charges, which are, underwriting fees, processing fees, things like that are associated with it, that could be written off. But when you mention taxes, one of the benefits of each one of these programs is that the interest is still tax deductible. So a lot of people weren't sure about lines of credit or second mortgages, if those are tax deductible. In most cases, I know there's always exceptions to the rule, they are tax deductible actually.
That's great. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, especially those that maybe haven't purchased before and they're renting and they don't really know what tax write-offs a new home could give them.
Exactly.
So do you just have a quick off the top of your head list of what those might be?
Yeah, so it's really the interest deduction. So whatever you pay in interest on the mortgage, you could actually deduct that. And any origination charge. So like I was mentioning, the processing, underwriting, which altogether on a purchase could be anywhere between $1,300 or $1,400 depending on the lender that you use. So those are two big write-offs that you can't have.
Right, and then there's write-offs. Again, this is a whole CPA question thing that's not for Ryan and I to answer, but home ownership, the years following, there are also write-offs that you can take year after year. I know that we do. So owning a home definitely does have more perks than you might even...
Especially if you run a business out of the home,
True.
You know what I mean? We could probably do a whole other class on that.
We probably could. We do have some, quite a few mom bosses actually that work from home that would probably really enjoy that information.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, next question. Cost/fees of selling versus refinancing. Well, I'll let you take the refinance, but on the selling end, the industry standard out there for sales commission for professional service fee is 6%. Team Evolution does give a break to MOMnation members, so just a little side note there. A couple of you that I have, that I've been talking to about listing are like, hey, wait a minute, that's not what we pay. No, it's not. But that is the industry standard out there. So you're looking at least 6%, and that's 6% of your sales price. So if you sell your property for $200,000, it's 6% of $200,000. There may be other costs associated with selling also in terms of moving costs that you wouldn't get if you refinance, and then any repairs that might come up after an inspection or something like that you may have to pull out of your pocket.
Yeah, and of course, if the buyer of your home is requesting for you to pay for home warranty or closing costs.
Closing costs.
Yeah, that could be another cost as well on top of that. And for refinancing, like I mentioned with the three options, the most expensive one is just fully paying off your mortgage, and that's usually about $2,000. You do have to collect for taxes and homeowners insurance again, so that's a little bit of a cost. But you get a refund back for what you currently have in your escrow account. Plus, let's say, for instance, we're closing right now in April, you actually skip a month's payment. So you skip May, your first payment will be June 1st.
That's awesome.
So some of the costs, even though it's rolled into the mortgage and the cost of actually collecting for taxes and insurance again, that gets kind of washed out by the refund you get from your current escrow account and the month that you miss of payments, actually. So
yay, a free month.
Free month. Everybody loves that.
Where else can you go live somewhere for free for a month? Right? I see some questions coming in, guys, and we're trying to keep this little session here at, not going too far out of time because we're all busy people here, all of us. So keep coming with your questions, with your comments, and I'm going to come back to this feed later, and Ryan and I are probably going to do a take 2 with those questions. Is that cool? All right, so here we go. Next question, Ryan. This one's for you.
All right.
Any inspection needed to refinance?
Well, not a home inspection, but an appraisal is required, actually. So with an appraisal, it usually costs between $400 and $600. And the appraiser does go out to the home and inspects it. It's a lot less involved as like a full home inspection like Katie would order if you're buying a home.
Right.
So they only usually spend maybe about half an hour there and kind of look things over, measure the property to understand how much the square footage is. Because a lot of the time tax records are incorrect. So appraisers want to go out there and they want to measure just to know accurately how much square footage it is.
And that's good for you too, for them to do that, to be verifying.
Yeah, a lot of times it comes in higher than what tax records are showing. So the appraisal is required. So what they do is they pull comparables in the neighborhood, homes that have sold usually between the last 1 to 6 months to determine how much your home is currently worth and if it's in a good condition to sell. Sometimes if or even refinance actually. If you're doing an FHA loan or conventional loan, there's certain standards for the property that they require before allowing financing again. So part of that is like if the roof needs to be replaced, sometimes they might have to call that out and require that. It's not very often, but if there's certain glaring issues with the home, it might prevent you from actually refinancing. It might have to be completed before doing the refinance.
Yeah, that has happened. And really good point, bringing us back to the very beginning of the conversation when Ryan said, hey, if you're thinking about refinancing, just reach out to Katie and see what your house is worth. Super good point. Because if he gets this appraisal ordered and that appraiser steps over the threshold of your home, that's costing you $400 to $600 like that.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter what the answer comes back at.
Yeah.
So you might as well know going into it, hey, do I have, a really good chance of this appraising here? I'm certainly not the be all end all. That appraiser is though. And his opinion is what's going to make or break your deal.
Yes. They have a lot of power in the real estate market.
They do. So you want to be prepared.
Yeah.
And there are certain things that you can do. And you know who you are, girl. The one that I just coached. I don't want to say your name here and put you on the spot, but the one that I just coached because she was getting a refinance to get her PMI removed. And I gave her some tips on how to support her value, and she killed it, and she got it. So,
nice.
yay us.
Awesome.
All right, next. This is kind of a long one. How does selling and buying a home at the same time work logistically?
Great question.
Oh, that's a good one. Do you want to take that one on first and on your end, and then I'll take it on my end?
Sure. I mean, when we're doing a pre-approval, hi, Allie. Looks like Allie's joined.
Hi, Allie.
When we're doing a pre-approval, actually, and you're looking to sell your home and purchase another home, what's called is a contingent pre-approval. So we do have to typically require, unless you could qualify with both mortgage payments, which sometimes is the case, that would be ideal. So you could sell you don't have to sell your home, but you could move into your new home and then list your property, and people could come and look at your home, and you don't have to be around to let them in. So that's always a great option. But if you need to sell your home for qualifying purposes and for down payment purposes, we do have to do a contingent offer. And a lot of the times, of course, doesn't look as good to a seller, because you're throwing in a little bit of risk there. What if the home doesn't sell? What if something happens with the financing? So logistically, it's a little bit more difficult, but we do them all the time, especially nowadays that people have so much equity in their homes and they want to roll that into the new property. It's something that we have to do quite often.
Yeah, it's actually happening a lot right now. There's
Yeah.
a lot of contingencies out there. In the business, we call them daisy chains. When one house has to sell for one house to sell for one house, it can get like up to 6 houses.
Yeah, we've had that happen.
It gets pretty nuts.
It gets risky because if one thing goes wrong with just one of those, it could throw the whole thing off. Yeah.
Exactly true. So what Ryan says was sort of the portion that I wanted to insert here. I absolutely love real estate in terms of its investment opportunity.
Yes.
And so if you can, and Ryan says, yes, you're good to go, let's do this, and then you talk to me and I say, yes, you're totally good to go, you can get a tenant at the amount that you need. If you can keep your current home, and I know this sounds funny coming from somebody who sells houses, but if you can keep your current home and stick a tenant in your current home and start getting a little bit of cash flow, even if it's a few $100 a month, now you're starting to build your investment portfolio.
Exactly.
And I think that's a super cool thing, especially right now with rentals being through the roof. I mean, if you've got any friends that have rental properties, talk to them about it. I bet cash flow is in abundance.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up with tenants, because when qualifying for a new mortgage, if you do have a current property and you want to rent it out, if by the time that we're closing, if you have a lease agreement on that property, we could use that lease to offset that mortgage. So you don't have to qualify with 2 mortgage payments, which is difficult to do.
Can be.
You could actually offset that with a lease agreement if you have a tenant coming in place, actually. So
great point. And it's all about coordinating that appropriately, guys.
Yes.
And there are people who are very qualified and experienced and coordinate that kind of stuff all day long that you really need to talk to prior to doing something like that. Because it's a big deal, guys, and you can get yourself into some super messy stuff. Don't you think, Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I've always wondered about equity and refinancing. How does that work? So we kind of went over that when we talked about the loan to value and the 80% thing.
Yeah.
Anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, kind of like I mentioned, it really just depends, and that's why it's great to speak to to Katie regarding the value of your home. It's important to know how much your home is currently worth, so if you sell it, how much you'll be pocketing, or if you refinance, how much you could possibly take out. And like I mentioned, with the programs out there, you could only really take out usually between 80% and 90% of what your home is worth. 90% like True West, that line of credit that I mentioned. So it's a great program. They're very aggressive with that.
Yeah.
So it really just depends on how much your home is worth and how much you owe. And if you take 80 to 90% of that and subtract that from what you owe, that's really, depending on whatever loan option you're looking for, is how much you could take out of equity of your home.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great question, guys.
Yeah, great questions.
Next one, should you refinance to lower your interest rate? Is that the best reason to refinance?
It could be, yes. It just depends on what your current rate is. When you refinance, of course, you'd have to start the term over again. And when you start a term over again, if you look at a schedule of your payments and how much is going towards interest and how much is going towards principal, the majority of it goes towards interest.
In the beginning. So when he says
yes.
term, he means if you got a 30-year deal and you refinanced it into another 30-year deal, you're starting on day one.
Yes.
Of your 30 years.
Exactly. So sometimes it doesn't make sense to do that. So when we do a refinance, sometimes what we try to do is, instead of doing a full 30-year term again, if you had it before but you paid on your house for a few years, we try to actually do maybe like a 28-year term, which is possible. So you don't have to start that schedule all over again. So,
and pay more to interest than you pay to principal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So really the way that we kind of determine it is how long you plan on living in the home. And based off the refinance, how much you're going to be saving each year. And if what you're saving and how long you're going to be living in a home is more than how much it costs to refinance, it's going to make sense to do it. So we just recently had a client, because like I mentioned, it takes about $2,000 to do a full refinance, but they were saving $100 a month with the refinance. And based off of where they were at in their careers and their children, they wanted to stay in the home probably for 5 more years. So of course that would make sense.
Because it starts to recoup after 2 years now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good point. Not a lot of people think about that. They just want the lower interest rate and the lower payment, but they don't realize in the end how much that may have tacked on to their loan. It just sometimes doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and if you plan on selling it anyways, it wouldn't make sense.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Cool, good question. All right, next. If you chose to refinance, is it possible to decrease your closing costs?
Yes. If you do want to decrease your closing costs, because closing costs are fixed, the title companies, underwriting fees, processing fees, those are fixed. So ways that you could actually completely do away with closing costs altogether is sometimes you could actually increase your interest rate a little bit and pay for your closing costs. So we don't always recommend that, because we'd rather you save each month rather than, not pay closing costs. But sometimes it could possibly make sense. So what we always quote is what's called a par rate. So that means that it doesn't cost you anything to get that rate, and there's no credit. But if you want to go a little bit higher than the par rate, you could actually get a little bit of a credit to pay for closing costs. So that is possible.
So it's all just in how the numbers work out?
Yeah.
You sit down, you do your pros and cons, and you just really calculate to the penny what each costs,
Exactly.
and then you can kind of figure it out from there.
That's correct.
Yeah, that is the best way to go about it. I agree. Sort of a secondary question to that question we just answered. Is it best to approach the mortgage company that you're already with?
Yeah, sometimes it could be, actually. They could give you discounts because they currently have your mortgage. They're still going to have to do a full underwrite of your property. They'll still have to have an appraisal on the home, but sometimes they can offer discounts. But sometimes they disguise that a little bit. They'll send you something in the mail and say, a no-cost refinance. So I have some of my past clients who come into my office and say, they give me one of the flyers or something in the mail saying, hey, they're offering me this, it's a no-cost refinance. But it's exactly what I mentioned before. The rate's a little bit higher than what we could give them, because they increase the rate to pay for the closing costs to give you that no cost. So, everybody gets paid somehow, so you kind of got to read the fine print a little bit. So, but if you want a second opinion, if you do get a quote from your current company and they're giving you kind of some sort of special offer, I'm happy to take a second look at it just to make sure you're getting a good deal. Half the time I'm like, yeah, you get a good deal, definitely go with it. The other half I could be like, you know what, we could probably do better than that, and we could look into that.
It's always good to seek for answers.
Get a second opinion.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. All right. Any options to lowering payments, also known as refi, if credit is less than par, or are we out of options if our credit isn't so high?
So you do have to actually reapprove yourself for the mortgage if you're doing a line of credit, if you're doing a second mortgage or a full refinance. So if your credit does need some work, we would have to work on that. Sometimes a second mortgage or a line of credit is not as strict on the guidelines as a full refinance.
Right.
So that might be something to look into. But as Katie knows, we would still work with you if you are interested in taking an application and getting a credit check to see where you stand. We could always kind of coach you, let you know what needs to be done to get your credit score increased to eventually qualify for that refinance. So long story short, yeah, a credit check is required. You do typically have to have over 600 score, but if you need help with it, we're here to help.
So let me back you up for a sec. So I could call you, do an application with you. You tell me, oh, gee, Katie, your credit could be better here, could be better here, could be better here,
Yes.
in order to get to this place you want to be.
Yes.
And I will coach you through this and get you there.
Yes.
Is that what I just heard?
That's correct.
And you do that for no charge?
We do it for no charge.
That's
We'll
so
send
super
you
cool.
an email with a copy of your credit report, and we'll do just kind of a bullet point, real simple, like you pay down this Capital One credit card, maybe increase your credit line on this credit card. So there's a few easy things that we could do to get your score increased, and we'll coach you through that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, next. This is a good one. FHA loan to conventional loan refinancing.
Yes.
If we have at least 20% paid off or in cash, should you refinance from a FHA to conventional? Any pros, cons with that?
Yes, that's a great question. So FHA, you are required at any time to still pay mortgage insurance on an FHA loan.
Right.
That changed a couple of years ago. It used to be after 5 years, and when you have that 20% equity, it would fall off.
Right.
But now, no matter what, if you put half down on a home, you still have to pay that mortgage insurance. But if you put 20% down on a conventional loan, so if you have that 20% equity, you don't pay that extra mortgage insurance. So I have a lot of clients that we've closed in the past 3 or 4 years. I do a yearly call to all my past clients and do kind of a check-in with their mortgage. If they have that 20% and they have an FHA loan, a lot of the times we do a refinance. So the only drawback of that is rates were still pretty good 2 or 3 or 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. In some cases we're very low 3%, which really isn't around right now on a fixed rate. So at times we could remove the mortgage insurance, but the rate will increase and it kind of offsets that and doesn't make sense. So every case is a little bit different, but if you could get an interest rate pretty similar to what you have with your old loan, it would make sense to get rid of your mortgage insurance, because that could be anywhere between $100 to $250 a month, depending on your loan size.
Yeah, that's expensive.
Yeah.
Did I just hear that you contact your clients and remind them to check on their values and their PMI?
Yes. Yep. Every year I do a
That's
yearly
awesome.
check-in, actually. So yeah, I pull kind of an estimate of what I feel like their home is worth, and just see if it would make sense to refinance, or if they have any questions. Yeah. So I do a complimentary call every year.
That's cool, because I'm a mom and there's only so much I can keep in here, and it's usually not personal stuff. It's usually for work and for other people.
Right.
So for Ryan to call me and say, hey lady, do you want to save some money?
Yes.
That's really cool.
Thank you.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
This may be more of an answer for me, but we'll see. We'll give Ryan a shot. Is there a time of year that is financially best to buy or sell?
Oh, that's a good question. Did you want to?
Anything on your end? Financially best to buy or sell. When I trying to think of what exactly that question means, and the only thing that I can think of is, what's the best time to sell? Is there any point in time in the year that's the best time? Mm-hmm. And would you agree that real estate is cyclical?
Yes, absolutely.
Whether our market is in the crapper or doing great, which it is right now, it's cyclical. Like there are certain times when there's season and there's certain times when we're not in season, right?
Correct.
It's the same here. So after nearly 11 years of doing this, I see the exact same thing happen every year, whether, like I said, we're in a crap market or a great market. And basically, things start popping right around now. So springtime is a very, very good time to sell. I would say probably between beginning of March to about the end of June is pretty busy. Would you say for your business it is as well?
And I think part of that is with tax returns or refunds, actually.
Yep.
A lot of people between March and April, they get their tax refund and they're ready to buy. A lot of people use that as their down payment, so that's why selling your home around that time is good.
Yeah. Great point. Really great point. And then I find, and you tell me if this is the same for you, which probably is since we, work together. But July and August kind of crickety.
Yes,
like
it is.
There's really not a whole lot of activity going on. People are on vacation, figuring out, getting ready for school shopping, all
it's
of that
hot.
kind
No
of
one
stuff.
wants to move in 110 degree temperature.
Right?
Right.
And then September, something magical happens.
Yeah.
And usually about mid-ish September, I don't know, maybe a little bit earlier this past year, but mid-ish September through until you hit the holidays.
Is when it really picks up.
Until you hit Thanksgiving is when it really picks up. So those are great times to sell. Now, great times to buy. Of course, depending on your financials and interest rates and things like that, there's a lot of things to consider when you're considering a purchase. But if you choose to buy during the times in the season when it's a little bit more slow and there's a lot less competition out there for buyers, like holidays, I can't tell you. I think I sell a house on Christmas every year. And it's because these people are like, well, I know there's not a lot of buyers out right now, and now is the time that now it's not really fun maybe to shop during the holidays, but less competition means less demand, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Bottom line.
Yeah.
All right, here's the next one. We're almost done. How often should you or can you refinance to be most beneficial, especially with PMI involved?
Great question. Yeah, and I think it really just depends on the savings that you're going to get from the refinance. And like I mentioned before, if you're going to be living in the home long enough that it makes sense where you make that cost back by the savings that you have each month with either lowering your interest rate or taking off your mortgage insurance. So, we don't recommend refinancing often because, there are costs. There's the appraisal fee, there are the title fees, lender fees, things like that. So you don't want to do it too often because it really dips too much into how much you're saving each month. So, that's a good question.
That was a good one. All right. This one's for you. This is the last one for you. Okay.
All right.
How does an ARM interest rate work? And can you refinance while you have that? Say you do a 5-1 ARM. Can you refi after year 3?
Yes, you can. Yeah. So you might want to read the terms of the mortgage. In the past, back in like the 2005 to 8 days when there was a lot kind of strange mortgages out there was something called prepayment penalties, where if you paid the house off after 2 or 3 years, you would be penalized for it. A lot of those went away though after the market kind of changed and the regulators came in and realized they don't want people to be stuck with an adjustable rate mortgage and they can't refinance. So right now, as long as you don't have a prepayment penalty, which most don't, you could refinance. So a great option, of course, with the adjustable rate mortgages is if you feel like you're not going to be living in the home for more than a certain time, it would make sense to do it because they are less of an interest rate than a fixed rate. So sometimes we talk to clients that are pretty certain they're not going to be living in the home for more than 5 years. It's a starter home, they want to build some equity and then move up from there. So at that time, we might do like a 7-year ARM, which means that they're going to sell the home before it even adjusts. So, but if they actually end up wanting to stay in the home, you can always refinance into a 30-year fix down the road.
Good point. So there's ways of doing things is what we've learned today.
Yes.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
I see a couple of questions, guys. We're going to cut this short because both Ryan and I do have appointments to run to, but we super care about you, of course, and I am going to revisit this feed and we will get those other questions answered, Ryan and I, again. We might do a take 2 here, see if I can talk him into it. I don't know. Can I talk you into it?
I'll do it. Sure.
Ah, he's so easy. So again, what is your texting phone number?
I'll give you actually my direct. It's 602-614-0740. That's my direct cell phone and my direct texting line.
Awesome. So you can text him whatever questions you have. And again, I will get with him on the questions that came up during this feed. We totally adore you all. Thank you so much for watching us and for your questions and just all of this awesomeness. And I hope that you have a happy Wednesday.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.